All right, welcome to another expert interview. As always, super excited for today's guest. We're going to have a great conversation. Before we jump in, if you're watching this on YouTube, please go below the video, comment, like, subscribe. Make sure that you follow myself and you follow today's guest. We are both open to connect with you, learn about you and your journey, and build some relationships. So let's jump straight into it. Today we have Keanu. Keanu, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Devin. I really appreciate you. I've enjoyed our conversations. So I'm excited that we get to hit record and let some others listen in as we get going. My background, really quick, is in a lot of roles that had to do with people and serving people, helping people. I wanted to go into law enforcement straight out of high school, but I couldn't, being 18. So I went into corrections and then eventually went into the Army National Guard, finally found my way to law enforcement, then went into financial services for a time and then ministry. And so when you look at my resume, it looks very scattered and how in the world did all of this happen? But I realized that there was a common theme, and it was people and it was leadership and understanding people. And so operating in those roles, naturally, I had to take a lot of personality assessments or personality profiles. Even with law enforcement, I had to take a very long 3-hour assessment that told me that I have a tendency to be slightly narcissistic, but I still became a police officer. So I guess it wasn't too bad. But all of these assessments, they had kind of showed me who I was, like a snapshot, and I would read them and say, wow, that's surprisingly accurate. And then I'd file them away or throw them away, and I never revisit them. But when I went into ministry, full-time ministry here in Charlotte, North Carolina, for a very large church that runs like a very large organization, they had me take the Enneagram. And so when I took that, it just grabbed me differently. It was showing the fluidity of a person, not just who they were in a snapshot, but what they look like at their best, worst, and everything in between. And I started to realize, wow, I've been so blind to my tendencies and things that I thought were strengths or things that I thought were weaknesses. Maybe I had them classified wrong, or things that I thought just were. And this was just how I had to live and how I had to exist. There was opportunity to grow in that. So I began applying it in my role in the church that I was working for. And naturally, some of those people I was coaching were business owners, and they wanted me to help with their teams and their leadership teams and helping to understand their strengths and how to be more efficient. And naturally, that led to a business. So now I have a company, a team of 4, True Strategy, still out in Charlotte, North Carolina, married, no kids. We have a 4-year-old English Mastiff, no kids yet. And just building the business, man, loving understanding why people do what they do and helping them to understand that more and make better decisions or be more efficient in their business and their legacy.
I love it, man. I love your story and I love your journey because to your point, it seems like it's all over the place. And it was interesting. I did an expert interview yesterday and it was a very similar conversation, right? Jumping through different things, but there is that unifying kind of theme of people. And I love where you landed. And I'm really interested to learn more about what you're doing and how it works and why it's impactful for people, because I think most business professionals probably have some exposure to a personality test. And it's probably the same experience you had. Hey, take the test. Whoever the hiring manager, decision maker is, looks at the test and goes, do they fit the bucket? They fit the bucket. They hire them and the test never gets looked at again.
Right.
Okay, cool. Like, well, that's great. We hired that person with that one snapshot then. So what do you see trending in your space? Like if you look at your industry, is there a trend or something people should be aware of?
Well, it's interesting because it depends on the company. Some companies have done a lot in the space of what someone does. And so when we're approaching them that, we've done Colby, we've done DISC, we've done, name insert assessment here. And so what sets us apart? And so when I tell them and help them understand that those show the what, this shows more of the why. So, okay, they will have a tendency to say, if it's DISC, right? B higher D, moderate I, low S and C, to show how to use them. But okay, well then what happens when they get put in a place of stress, or they're not operating in a place of purpose, or they're not operating at their best, right? How do you understand, well, why are they high D, right? What is that? What got them there, or what's going on underneath that? So people will be really excited to find something, being very exciting to lean into something that leans more into the why, but it really just depends on the company. I did have a guy, I was speaking at an event. And there's always that one person, you do some speaking as well. There's always that one person that's sitting up front with their arms folded, and you could tell they just ate a sour head. They don't want to be there, but they have to be there. And he's that one guy. And I think we all have that tendency, if you're speaking, whether it's speaking to a classroom or a bunch of people, to find that one person that hates you and just focus on them. So I did, but I started speaking about it. And as we're having a conversation, he just kind of started to soften up and he started to lean in. And before you know it, you can tell he's engaged. And afterwards, he approached me and he said, I was so upset that you were here, but I thought, you know what, I'll show up and see what he has to say. He said, but what set it apart, he said, and I've operated in several corporate atmospheres and corporate roles. What set it apart is that you talk about what happens at your best, worst, and everything in between. He said, because what if I take this assessment and I'm really pissed off? Or what if I take this assessment and I just had the best day of my life? How is it telling me who I am given what's going on in my life? And so it kind of started to change his mind. So as far as trends goes, it's really interesting to see where a company's been with their journey with personality assessments, but it's also not surprising. It wasn't the beginning to find that a lot of companies don't do anything. They just operate by feel and intuition. And I'm like, that's great. I can run to work, but I also have a car to get me there a lot faster, and I would not have to be as tired on the journey. And that's what, assessments do. They help us to get somewhere faster and in a way that doesn't waste as much energy or require as much energy.
Love it. That's a perfect tee up. I appreciate that. I'm gonna go ahead and hit the ball. So
sweet.
So kind of moving into the why, right? Why would an organization need or even consider looking at doing a test, right? And then we'll move more specifically into your test, which I think you've already talked a lot about, and based on what I've read, and we'll get into mine too, and because I think there'll be some good conversation there. Why do you need it? If we look at a small, medium business, let's say under 25 employees, why is this relevant to them?
Well, especially a small, medium business as they're growing, if they are growth oriented and they believe building people ultimately gets them to where they want to go, right? If they believe in relationship over result, first and foremost, that's the kind of person I work with, right? They have to care about that, because I'm not in the business of changing anyone's mind. If they think, well, this is all whatever, I don't really need this, people should just show up and do their jobs. Well, that's fantastic. Reach out to me if you need me. The conversation is pretty much over at that point. So first and foremost, the kind of person that has that desire, if they have that desire, then the reason why it's helpful and it supports them, and I would say that they need it, is again, not spending so much time and energy trying to figure out why something is done, but being able to point directly at something. So to make it very simple, the Enneagram and showing why things happen, if I go into, and we'll probably get into it here in a moment with your results, because of the depth of the assessment and what it exposes about what's going on inside of a person's world, is I find that it's very disarming to people when they have permission for their perspective, right? When they have permission for how they feel or how they think, and they think, well, doesn't everyone think like that? Or I thought I was the only one. Right. And so when they have permission, they don't feel alone. It's very disarming to people. So I go into a conversation with someone at the beginning of the hour, and we're complete strangers. And at the end of it, they've told me things they have never told anyone, because they didn't have a language for it. And so when we can take that same impact or that same result and apply it to teams, well, now we've accelerated relationships in a couple of hours. If we're working, say, in a team workshop that would have taken years to develop, if ever. Some people go through this life, and it saddens me. They go through this life never understanding why they do what they do. They just show up and do it because we've always cut the ends off the ham, right? Have you heard that story, right? Because we've always done it. So let's just continue to do it. And they never question why, and understand that we've left so much potential or so many relationships on the table. And so the quickest way that I would explain the Enneagram, when people would ask, well, what is this? What do you do? I would say we accelerate results by accelerating relationships. Ultimately, every result, anything we want to see, comes from a relationship, right? The relationship that you build with your spouse, right? The relationship that you build with those around you, your friends, any result that you want to see comes from a relationship. And I know you are a key sales coach, and I know that you lean into the relationship side of it instead of just, hey, does Tuesday or Thursday work better for you? No, let's get to understand each other. And the Enneagram helps to give that insight. So that's where it's really helpful. Then we take that side of it. That's the soft skill, intangible side of it, of understanding each other, getting the best out of each other, and why we do what we do. Then we can lean into more of the practical strategy side of it that says, do we have the right people in the right seats? And if we thought we had the right people in the right seats, maybe is there something else that can be added to that? Or where are we burning through people, wasting money by not being able to retain people or attract people because we didn't even see where the flaw was? So in the beginning, it's more relational. And then as we get the relational part down, we get into results. I picked up one client, very, very large construction company. Well, comparatively speaking to some small businesses that I started with, $15 million construction company. And this company had 3 key leaders. And we're understanding the difference in their dynamics with the Enneagram. And I do a lot of mediation as well. So if there are big decisions that need to be made and the partners or the key leaders are just butting heads and they can't see eye to eye, I do a lot of mediation. And we just made a massive decision where they're going to be going to a unlikely source to provide opportunity for people to get job training. And now, we're moving into that lane. And that was something that was a result of this kind of work of being able to understand, why do we see it differently? And why are we at each other's throats? Because we ultimately want the same end result, but what's happening in between? And I had a client say recently, I'm coming to find, she's a young leader, but very, very talented. She said, I'm coming to find that most of leadership is personality management. Like, absolutely. That's it. 100%. So when you have a tool like the Enneagram, it just gives you the top of the line, I believe, tool in understanding why people do what they do. And let's get straight to the issues and let's move back into our results and ultimately building our legacy.
I love it, man. I love that you talked about acceleration, right? I think that's a great way to explain why this kind of tool, or in general, right, you would apply tools to your business, right? You apply tools to enhance something, speed the process up, create efficiencies. And I love your example. You did mention recruiting. So let's go there for a second. So if I'm growing my team and I'm looking to hire, how does understanding what personality to put in what seat, how does that really impact my hiring process?
Well, what's interesting is that with certain assessments, and I do like a lot of them, one that we're actually looking to add to our process is Working Genius by Patrick Lencioni. So it's very, very heavy what. I mean, it's pointed, it's what, and the Enneagram's more of the why. So you need both. And when the church that I came to work for, Elevation Church, they had us do Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, and Strengths Finders. And I love Strength Finders and I love the Enneagram. Myers-Briggs, I'm kind of on the fence about. But either way, it showed a whole person picture. And you need that when you're bringing someone on, just to understand, even if it's just to develop them, right? Even if it's, I like this person, I really think they're a great fit, but maybe they're, green around the gills. They're very new in the professional sphere, but I want to develop them. When you use tools like this, you're able to accelerate that development in a way they may have never had exposure to something like this. So one, it develops them on the way in, but two, it helps to see, you are applying for this job that is 99% or 90% in front of people. But these assessments show that you're going to be drained by people, right? And all assessments kind of show that to some degree, introversion, extroversion. Are you sure you want to do this? Because in 3 months, you're going to either hate life and not want to work here anymore, or you're going to grin and bear it and be miserable. And, I'll never know it. So figuring out why, how to put the right person in the right seat, that's the most basic side of it. And then outside of that is really enjoying who you work around. You work with a lot of business owners, as do I. I come to find the people that are most successful later on in their success, it's not about money anymore. And it's not even about the growth. It's about enjoying what you do and who you do it with. And this really gives a fast track to understanding, who do I enjoy and why? And it's very interesting, depending on the leader, to use an assessment to say, well, I'll hire a 8, but I won't hire a 5. Well, I can tell you right now with my team, I have 3 8s and a 3. So all very, very driven, all gas, no brakes, but follow through or tenacity is something that is kind of a grind for all of us. So I'll tell you, when we hire next, I'm not looking for another leader. I'm looking for a great support role. So it's helpful to know that, hey, the team has a huge gap here. And if we don't, solve for that, then we're going to be lacking. And every team has that, regardless of your size. If you had a team of 6 people and one person changed on the team, the whole dynamic changes. You're a football fan?
Yeah, love sports.
OBJ is not about the skills that he brings to the Rams. I think personally that he's a non-factor, and the Rams are still going to lose to the Cowboys if they happen to meet. But it changes the whole dynamic, because now what's the ripple effect that one person to a 52-man roster, what does that one person do? Now think about that in your business. In professional sports, you have a whole year to craft your roster and figure out how everyone works together. In business, you're hiring and firing every day. So your dynamic is ever changing. The more you can understand that dynamic and the culture that you're ultimately creating, the better off you're going to be in building your business, and then also just enjoying it, because it's hard.
Well, I love that. I love kind of, no matter what personality test you look at, I love that idea of like, hey, I like to hire people that are like me, which happens, right?
Yes.
So we end up with a team of us, but we probably need a team of not us, right? Depending on what we're hiring for. And it's a relevant conversation. I've had some hiring conversations this week, and that always comes up, right? Like, man, all my people are dreamers. So are you, right?
Yeah.
Like you're a dreamer and you like that. You like that time,
Yes.
but your follow through, you checking the boxes, your administrative work, your paper pushing, dude, no one on your team likes that. So either you have to outsource it or hire for it, and your next hire better be more, focused. So I love that. So let's talk money, right? So this sounds like a lot of work. It sounds like a lot of money. Is it a lot of money for a business to implement testing?
Well, so what we're doing right now, and by the time this episode is released, our assessment is going to be entirely free. And we started by monetizing it because, that seemed to be the route. But, for me personally, it's about legacy, and the rock doesn't get to see the ripple. So made a decision here recently, hey, let's just make the assessment completely free and just put it out there. So we're also, with the assessment, allowing some opportunities for people to learn how to implement it themselves. So in the beginning, it just costs you time and energy, right? Go take the assessment, won't cost you any money, apply it. But if you want to apply it at a greater level with coaching, consulting, things of that nature, well, then yes, it could be a larger investment. But I think as business owners, there's a great lesson to be learned as in how we see finances and seeing the investment and not the spend. And that was a huge paradigm shift for me because I was raised very poor. All I saw was spend. All I knew was spend, right? What am I losing? Not what am I gaining? And so when you think of the investment, how much is it worth to show up to work every day and really enjoy everyone around you? How much does it cost you when you don't want to show up because there's that conversation that you've been needing to address, but you don't want to address it because it's awkward and uncomfortable? What does that cost, right? And we can't measure it, but if we can't count what matters, we'll make what we can count matter. Right? It's very hard to count or give a tangible value to that kind of stress. And the work that we do helps to alleviate a lot of that. It's expensive possibly to bring me in and work with your team, but it's also expensive to replace that person that's about to quit and you don't even know it. So it's just a matter of the mindset for a person. I like working with people, again, back to my avatar. I like working with people that think invest, not spend. They think I want to invest in my people. I want to invest in my team because I believe in it. And yes, all of those things suck. And if Keanu can help me with those things, then it'll be a lot better. So it really depends. I mean, from a straight up, out there kind of model, a 1-hour class to come in and speak with your team right now is about $1,200.
Well, I love your answer, man, and I teed that up on purpose for you, right? Because
Thanks.
I want people to understand that whether you're looking to work with you and use this personality test or any personality test, there are usually a lot of free assessments where you can go get information at no cost but time, right? And you having information and at least digging in is better than not. And I love that you're available and you're a resource to businesses because I think that there's a lot to comprehend and there are things that you just don't know, right? Like this isn't what you as a business owner do every day, right? You as a business owner came to your job, your position with a set of skills and an interest in an industry. And this is probably not your set of skills. It's just not, right? There are experts that have taken the time to learn about it and help you speed that process up. So not only, can we get you into a tool that helps? I encourage you to go, take tests, learn, have your team do it. I think that this is probably one of those areas you're going to want someone alongside you to implement the tool correctly and speed that process up.
Yeah, you touched on something that was very, very important there. And business owners or business leaders feel so much pressure to be phenomenal developers of people. And I think every leader in development is different. And I've had this conversation with a few people. Can you outsource leadership? Sure, if you fire yourself and hire someone to replace you and elevate yourself, you can outsource leadership. You can always outsource development. So it's okay to separate leadership and development. As you mentioned, most people did not get in business. They didn't start roofing companies so that way they could build people, right? They saw an opportunity to create opportunity for people. We started our companies to build people. Let us do that for you. It's like there's this standard that's held to people where it's almost as crazy as if I started my business and now I have to go become an attorney so I can handle the legalities of running a business. No, you don't, right? I started my business. Now I got to become a CPA so I can handle my accounting. No, you don't. I opened a building. Now I have to go into construction so I can learn how to keep the building. No, you don't. Do what you do best, outsource the rest. And there are people there to support you ultimately, to help in that journey. So that's just an unfair expectation of yourself to have to do all of that. Everyone operates time, money, energy, right? And more often than not, we have two, and very rarely do we have all three. So sometimes there are people that have a lot of energy and a lot of time, but not a lot of money. Great. We have resources for you. More often than not, my clients have a lot of money and a lot of energy, not a lot of time. So they'll outsource that. Hey, here's the money. I want more time, right? So I can use this energy. I'm going to bring you in so we can do this. And just the slightest things. It's amazing how when you bring someone in with just the slightest perspective shift, how it can change everything in your business. I changed a company once with one word. And he said, if I paid all that money for that one thing, it was worth it. So it's just having that outside perspective. It's the same thing as if Devin, I bring you into my team. I do this for a living. There are things that, well, we exist in different worlds, similar, right? But if I brought in another personality expert, which I have, that focuses on different areas for my team, he's going to see things I don't see because you can't see the picture when you're in it.
No, and I love that. I love that you talk about the consulting approach and the outside perspective, because there's so much value to that. Because I'm not emotionally vested in your company. I'm going to look at your company from as factual of a point as I can, whether I'm looking at sales or processes, procedures, team development. I'm going to bring resources in to support those things. But again, I'm not in it every day, right? So I'm not as emotionally taxed. I'm not as tied into things. I'm just here to help you move towards whatever your mission, vision, and values are, right? And that's different for everybody, right? So when we say moving could mean scaling up. It could mean streamlining, could be lifestyle. That's all different answers. So I love that, man. I just love the perspective. So I know we're kind of getting towards the end. So I did take this test. I will tell you guys that it doesn't take a long time. I've taken a lot of personality tests. I think that this one, the questions are pretty easy to get through. It's not like this is a half-day commitment to go to go get some answers. So I took it. So let's open up. Let's talk about my test for a few minutes. Why don't you? I took the test. It says that I'm a type 7. So guide me through what my test tells me.
Yeah, sure. So being a type 7, how would you describe your personality first and foremost? And if you need help, think about how those around you would describe your personality or who Devin is.
Yeah, so definitely go-getter, big dreamer, connector, always place other people first, but I'm probably going to lead as well.
Love it. High energy, moves towards people, loves being around people, kind of lights up the room when you walk in.
I try.
So the type 7, put simply, fun, spontaneous, adventurous, motivated by a need to be happy, have stimulating experiences, and avoid pain. So very briefly, we can see what a person moves towards and what they move away from. Right. And so the type 7 is going to move towards that adventure, getting everything out of every experience, truly unlimited, right? There are no limits. It's just, how can we get more, and how can we grow, and how can we continue to reach the next level, but also avoids feeling trapped or bored or limited or missing out. So do you have severe FOMO?
I don't know if I have FOMO, but I can tell you over the years, that is definitely something I've had to be very diligent on, right? Is, I have tooled myself up to deal with confrontation rapidly, because it is something I would avoid, right? So conflict, confrontation, discomfort, I definitely do get bored, right? Which is why I love consulting, because it's new and fresh every day. So yes. I think it's very real,
I had a coworker tell me when I started my business, she said, and I think she meant it well, but it was one of those things where maybe that was an inside thought, but she said, I hope the next thing is your last thing, because I've done a lot of things and I get bored easily as well. And I said, it's going to be, because I can make it whatever I want it to be. And I'm a type 8, which shares a lot of characteristics with the type 7, because they neighbor each other. And so very much so the same, wanting to create and find lanes that are consistent while also giving you enough autonomy to create within that lane. And I definitely see that in you in entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs. The type 7 is probably the most natural entrepreneur. I find more type 7s in leadership and entrepreneurship, business ownership than any other type up to this point, given my experience. On the first page of the assessment, you'll see there you have internal drivers. So the internal drivers show you what you avoid, what you pursue, what your dominant struggle tends to be, and then a fulfillment message. And the fulfillment message is ultimately what we're looking for in life or from people, but can only be satisfied from a much deeper space. For me, that's my faith. And so with this, when we see what we avoid and we pursue, the type 7 avoids commitment, being deprived, trapped, facing emotional pain, limited, bored, or missing out, and pursues being happy, fully satisfied, or content. They seek to get the most from life in every experience. Now, when we're avoiding being trapped, being deprived, and we're always pursuing more or getting the most out of every experience, that's where the dominant struggle comes in, which is gluttony, right? More. The way that we describe the gluttony struggle there is in their pursuit of being fully satisfied, they feel empty inside and seek to fill themselves up to compensate for this feeling of lack. They can develop an insatiable desire to meet their needs, grasping for every experience and opportunity in hopes of not missing out. And this is we operate a bit in hyperbole, like the extreme measures, because that gets people's attention, right? We understand those moments where we felt at our lowest or our most empty. And when we're able to put some language to it, that's one thing. I love music. I think we all love music. If you don't love music, you have major problems that Devin or I can't help. But the thing that's so impactful about music, I was driving the other day and a song came on, and don't judge me, but it was one of Adele's latest, she always, reaches right through the soul. And I'm like, that is beautiful. Like what music does to you. And I started realizing that's what the Enneagram does. It gives you language for things that you feel, but can't describe, right? That's what music does. And so this is the type 7, the avoids, the pursues, the dominant struggle. Where do we see Devin in all of that? Where is that happening for Devin?
Yes, all of it. No, I mean, I will tell you this. So I've spent a lot of time reading it. And I think that the document, just so people understand, it's a 5-page document it comes instantly after the report, right? Which is awesome. And reading through it, it is very relevant. Like it is a good snapshot of like, are you really honing your skills in the weakness areas? And I can tell you when I look through, I love that you have those extreme messages, and that's just the first page. Like everything we've talked about yet, this is just page 1, guys. It's real, and it's that idea of like, okay, so yes, I have jumped through quite a different few ventures and I've tried different stuff, but like once you kind of figure out, to your point and kind of to my journey, like where your lane is, then you can get that fulfillment you're looking for. Yeah. For me, right? That's my journey. Yeah. And then, so let's briefly just touch on 2, 3, 4, 5. So what other contents on those other pages, like what are people going to receive there?
Yeah. So on the 5-page report, you're going to get pretty much the whole rundown of the Enneagram or of your type. In the second page, you're going to see paths. And paths is, again, when you look at the Enneagram, it's a symbol, right? It's 9 different types that are connected with a circle and some lines. And that's because it shows us how we take on characteristics from other people. That's humanity, right? It's not just you're a this or you're a this or you're a this. It's no, we're all kind of fluid and we're connected in a way. So that's what it shows. And those lines there are what we call paths. And that's what shows us where we take on characteristics of other types. Sometimes it's their worst characteristics. Sometimes it's their best characteristics. And that's where it shows us what path are we on, right? Are you on a path of stress or unhealth? How can we create some rumble strips, right? On the highway. If you hit the rumble strip, it says, oh man, I'm going off the road. I need to get back on. We don't have those things established in our mind. And the Enneagram helps us to understand that so we can stay in our lane or we can stay in health and continue to move forward, but also shows us what we look like at our best. So that way we can continue to maintain that. The next thing you see are wings. So again, I mentioned earlier, I'm an 8, you're a 7. I'm what you would call an 8-wing 7. I would assume based on your results, you're a 7-wing 8, which means we take a lot of characteristics from each other, but your core is a 7, my core is an 8, and we're just taking on some characteristics from each other. So again, showing more of that. We see leadership style, strengths, weaknesses, and how to lead you as a type. The reason we put how to lead you as a type and not how to lead others is because everyone that's listening is a leader, even if you just led yourself to get out of bed this morning. So how do you lead you? How do you motivate you? And then how do you see where others aren't leading you properly and helping to support them in leading you better? And then it gets a little bit more complex. I'll simplify it. Triads is basically our emotional imbalance. All of us have an emotional imbalance. Some people lean more towards anger. Some people lean more towards anxiety, right? Some people will lean into different areas, and this helps to show that. But to put it simply, we all operate either by our head, our instinct, or our heart, right? Our thoughts, our gut, or our action, or our feelings. And this shows, right? If someone is even as simple as this, you as a 7 will operate out of your head or logic and your thought processes. And if you were speaking to someone that was a 2, a 3, or a 4, they're operating out of feelings. So if you ask them, what do they think? You're not going to get as much as even if you just ask them, how do you feel about this? Right? Those little things like that. So it shows that. And it begins to move into an us-centered approach. It starts to show you how you are similar to the types around you. Then we get real deep and we go into child interpretations and defense mechanisms. And people ask, why do I need this in my business? Well, all of the people you hire and even you yourself are just taller, more wise, more articulate children, right? So there are still things we're carrying from our childhood, and let's understand where that's existing now. Because when we get into that place of maybe victimhood, or we're feeling offended, or we're frustrated, that traces way, way further back than when we started this job. So let's understand where we've carried this now into the dynamic. And then defense mechanism, how do we defend ourselves? How are we more naturally able to defend ourselves? For the 7, that's rationalization. Type 7s avoid owning their real intentions, motivations, and how their behavior impacts others by rationalizing their unacceptable thoughts, feelings, and actions. Put simply, finding the silver lining, right? Everything, there's always a silver lining. It's always better. It's always going to be okay. And then the last 2 things you'll find on the report are interpersonal relationships and then conflict styles. So this puts all 9 types together and says, how do you all respond to getting your needs met in relationships, also in relation to each other? And then the last thing is, how do you respond in conflict? Because we all see each other very differently in conflict. We think that we're justified in our actions in conflict, and other people will see us as outrageous or passive or whatever it may be. And this one here is the real moneymaker, right? The conflict coping styles, because what we also have there are conflict triggers. And so if I understand, let's say I was speaking to you and I read through these conflict triggers and I asked you, hey, what's going on here? Where are you experiencing this in your role or in the company? Then we could very quickly get to the root of some issues. So that's a 30,000 foot overview of everything you'd find in the results of our Enneagram assessment.
I love it, man. And guys, I want to stress this enough. And I try not to push and promote directly, but I'm going to push and promote because this is phenomenal. Like the amount of information in here, guys, is next level. Like it really touches on, and to your point, so much more of the why than I've ever seen in one of these. And it's in 5 pages, because I've taken some of these, one that took 2-3 hours to take. And then you end up with this like 15-20 page sealed document. And like, you can't even get through it. Like you can't even comprehend it. What I can say with yours is, even when I read through it, especially going back to page 2, looking at like, hey, if it's positive, this is probably how you're going to react. And if it's negative, it's interesting because when I read through the bullet points of the negative, it's like, yes, I have created some of my own trigger points there. But a couple of those bullet points, I was like, ooh, okay, I like that. And that's a good, to your point, like the rumble strips. Okay, I'm going to like remember that piece, because if I start feeling this way, that may be me mentally taking myself a direction I don't need to go. Man, I love that. I love the communication styles. I love that you've got, childhood and how you got here, your defense mechanisms, your conflict, there's a lot here, guys. So I was excited for today's topic because I think that this is probably one of the most valuable and underutilized tools in business. I think that with personality tests, you guys can become better leaders. You can become better partners. You can become better friends. When you start to look at people and understand where are they coming from and why are they coming from that perspective, that's when you can have real conversations. Yeah. I'd love to end with that story we started with. So we started with a story you were talking about last night. You were at a networking event. Someone just wasn't fully engaged. What did you do to get them engaged, and how did your skill set allow that?
Well, what's interesting, and what I like to, I like there to be a transference that occurs from myself to my clients who are always business owners or business leaders, is that you don't even need your team to know all of the Enneagram, but if you can take in enough of it to understand, hey, basically there are these 9 ways of normal, and whether you go to the coffee shop, you go home, you go to your wedding, all these 9 normals are going to be in play. And so I was at a networking event last night, and we're standing there in a circle, and I'm obviously this all the time, right? Loving to talk, loving to get to know people. And someone said, hey, can someone get her to talk? And there was a lady there that was just completely removed herself from the circle. She was there, but she wasn't engaged. And I had been wanting to like engage her and bring her into it, but it's just like, okay, I don't know if that's really my space. I don't want to be a weirdo. I said, can someone get her to talk? And so I started asking some questions, and I started asking some questions with all of these 9 normals in mind. And when I talk to a team or speak at an event, I lead with that. Hey, there are 9 ways of normal. And if you just leave with that, your life will be changed, because then you won't be carrying the weight of the projection of, well, my way is the right way of doing it, or my way is the right way of seeing it. So I started talking to her and got to the point of asking her, would you call yourself a shy person? And she said, yes. And I said, well, why? And she was just kind of like stunned, like that. I don't know why, I just am. And she didn't say that, but you could see the look on her face. And some of the people in the group were like, who asks that? I said, well, that's genuinely the thing that is the skill, is genuine curiosity, right? Why? I didn't ask her that because I thought I knew. I asked her that because I wanted to know if she knew, right? Why are you confrontational? Why are you afraid of commitment? Why are you afraid of asserting yourself, right? Why do you feel like you don't have enough or you're not enough? And being able to go into that place, most people don't venture into that place because it's scary. And, you know, the Enneagram helps to give you a little bit of a roadmap to get into that. So started asking her, and naturally someone in the crowd knew what I did. And they said, well, you should experience the Enneagram. And then everyone's like, what's that? So we spent the next, 15, 20 minutes figuring out that woman is a 9. She's the peacemaker. And the peacemaker has a lot of potential, a lot of great leadership. I've heard it said like this: they're like the elephant, right? Very docile, calm, loving, peaceful. But when an elephant gets running, even the king of the jungle, even the lions get out of their way. So that's the type 9. And a lie that the type 9 believes is that their presence doesn't matter or their voice doesn't matter. So everyone else in the circle matters, but mine doesn't. And it was really cool. I got in that moment to speak to that, to say your presence matters, your opinion matters, your voice matters, your perspective matters. It hit a little bit closer to home because my wife's a 9. And naturally, we attract who we are, not what we want. So when we go to dinner or we're making new friends, it's like a lot of Keanu's and Devins, right? People are just like out to change the world and very like high energy. And I have to be mindful to invite my wife into the conversation and ask her her perspective, or what does she think, or what does she feel? Because if not, she'll believe her presence doesn't matter. And I will also help her to believe that by not validating her presence. So it was fun, man. I love it. But, again, back to the rock doesn't see the ripple. There are a lot of people out there that will exist because I cannot reach all 7.8 billion of them. There are a lot of people that will go through this life without ever knowing why. But I have a purpose and a mission to help as many as I can understand why, so they can really lean into their potential and the impact that they're called to have in this world.
Love it, man. I appreciate that story so much. And I want to tie that into some conversations I've had this week. I do a lot in the networking space. I talk a lot about connections. The video I just put up says I want you to meet everybody and stop limiting who you meet. Otherwise, you're not going to have cool conversations like this. You guys need to meet more people. And if it scares you to network, this is a tool that will actually unlock networking for you, because you will understand your tendencies and you'll be able to help other people in the room open up. And when you shared that story, I fully believe that. And I fully believe that if you're curious and you're engaging people, but to your point, you're engaging them with a skill set that most people in the room don't have. You're able to really figure out what their triggers are, make them comfortable, and create an environment where they can engage. And I think that a lot of people when we network don't understand our tendencies, and therefore we don't understand anyone else's tendencies either. So you end up in these networking environments that aren't comfortable, especially if you're not an outgoing person, right? And even if you are an outgoing person, then there's still introverts in the room that aren't engaged. So like, this is a skill set you guys could learn to really broaden those conversations and relationships. So I had to have you retell the story because I think there's so much value as an individual. And we didn't really talk about that. We talked about the business environment. We talked about teams. But I think that if you are an individual, if you're a sales professional, if you're out there trying to build a network and build relationships, you should take the test, and then you should take the time to do an hour, 2 hour, 3 hours of consulting to really dig in and understand the different types and how that can apply to your sales process, your networking process, and your relationship building. I promise you will close more deals, you'll book more meetings, and you're going to have more impacts. Period.
I'm with you.
So with that, let's ask the last 2 questions. So book, podcast, recommendation.
Oh, man, that is so tough because I vacillate so often with my podcast. So I might just have to spin the wheel and pick one. But for my book recommendation, I keep this. I have several copies back here, but this book changed my life. It's called Rhinoceros Success.
Hold on, wait. I'm going to move the monitor. The camera will move.
No way.
So this is a double recommendation, guys. So I was on with Brian Cushing, mortgage lender. We did his expert interview, and this was his book recommendation, and then he dropped one off. So that's a double recommendation, guys.
That is amazing. It's so cool. I keep extras because I give them to either my team. Anyone that joins my team gets it, or people that are, just building friendships with that are business owners. Rhinoceros Success absolutely changed my life, my mindset. You're a rhino, you're a cow. There's no problem with being either, but some people are rhinos. And when you understand that, it helps to classify and move into this. So I read this book probably every 6 months. It's a quick read. It's a fun read. I think it's like, I don't know, tell you how many pages for those of you that are that person. Literally Literally 99 pages, 99 pages. So very, very quick read. I have rhinos all over my office. My bookends, there are rhinos, and everyone that knows me, like they're always sending me rhino things. I even had a business partner give me a little turquoise rhino. More on why turquoise later on. Yes, let's go. Did he give you the rhino as well?
Oh, so yeah, so this came from, I hosted a gentleman from Zimbabwe, and the rhino is very important to them. And so when I hosted him, this was his gift when he left. And that was part of his story, was the rhino. And like when they tell the story from their culture, it definitely aligns with the message in the book. So
I love that.
dude, I'm fired up that you just brought that up. So that is the first time in every expert interview, and we've done a few now, and there are a lot more booked, guys, that we've had the same book recommendation. We've had a lot of Think and Grow Rich, which I would expect, but that is not an everyday reading book that I've heard recommended, but that's twice. I would say you guys should probably grab a copy at this point. And two people I highly respect that are amazing networkers and connectors. So there must be something in it from a mentality standpoint. You guys should check it out.
Absolutely.
So your journey, man, what's one thing you've learned that you want others to know?
Man, that is a tough question. As I scratch my head with my rhino. One thing that I've been saying a lot lately, I do in coaching some new businesses, I find that, if my purpose is legacy and the passion is legacy, that sometimes we got to put our money where our mouth is. And, new business owners have a lot of time and energy and very little money. So supporting them. One of the things that's really been hitting me a lot lately is the thought, exist long enough to be remembered, right? Exist long enough to be remembered in the business space. I've done a lot of things, and my usual career length is about 2 years. Of all those things that I did was about 2 years. And it's like, I'm bored, I'm out. And I'm happy to say that I am in January passing my 2-year mark of building my business. So it's going to be my longest standing relationship other than my marriage. Exist long enough to be remembered, right? Stick to that. People are going to come back around and find you and what you're doing and what your business is and what's happening out there. And as you continue to just put what you're doing out into the world, people will come back. I spent some time in financial services, which was the hardest, grinding my teeth against on the ground sales job I've ever done. And I still have people to this day that say, hey, can I talk to you about insurance or, investments or planning? And it's like, man, that was 3 years ago. So I think in the same way now I have people coming back around that I served early on that are, interested in my work. So exist long enough to be remembered. There is a part of this in building a business that just has to do with time. And with that, I would lean into my ultimate purpose and ultimate goal, which is building legacy. And I'll tell you more about this ring later on. That's my plug to have me back on. But, think about legacy. Truly do think about that. The rock doesn't see the ripple. So what kind of ripple are you creating right now? This is not, our life is but a vapor. And we're not meant to see the pinnacle of our success. We're meant to only be a stepping stone. And what are we doing to make this the best stepping stone or the best launch pad for whoever comes next?
Yes.
That's it.
Yes, all of that. Just that. There's not a lot in there. I think that's a whole conversation in itself. But I mean, to your point, man, I love your transparency. I appreciated that in our first meeting. I appreciate it today. I love that you're value focused and value driven. I think that speaks volumes to who you are as a person. And I love that saying, because that's part of what I work with sales professionals in is, look, you need to be on their radar long enough to be remembered, right? And if you're going to jump between industries and companies and all these things again and again and again, chasing a dollar, at some point, you're not going to find any dollars, right? Because no one knows what you do. And I have this, I mean, I'm not going to lie, I've been through the same journey, right? Although I was in one industry for 8 years and then I went through I'm going to dabble in everything space. Right? But I still have people call like, hey, can you build a website for me? Like, no, I can't. I don't do that anymore. I want to share a Ripple story. This is interesting that came in this morning. I like to check in with everybody at like the worst case scenario. I'll check in with everybody every 90 days. Anyone who knows me has seen the emails. Some of you have replied to those emails and told me to stop sending them to you, but you noticed them and you know exactly how many I sent. So touche. But I did a check-in yesterday. A young woman in town looking for a career, helped her make some connections, new in the industry, just trying to like give her some doors that would open. She couldn't get someone to hire her. She just couldn't get a meeting booked. Resume looked okay. Great resume. The design wasn't phenomenal, but she had the right intent, the right motive. Connected her with a bunch of people. She took the time and diligence to follow up and have coffee and beer with all of them. And she got a job, right? And that job has now opened up a career path for her. Those are the responses I'm on a mission to get, right? And even if I don't get the response, that's my thing. That's why if you look at any of my titles anywhere, connector is first. It's first, because I full well believe that if I can connect enough people with what they need and who they need, it comes back. And I love that story where I was able to see the ripple, right? I was able to see like, yes, okay, that was worth my time and energy because we positively impacted them. And I know that drives you seeing that team success as well. So I just want to share that story because it was so real today. And that's the kind of stuff that just like, I don't get to see all the time, but when I get the feedback, it's like, yes, we did it.
I love it.
So
good work.
I appreciate your time, man. I know you're busy. I know you're doing amazing things. We're probably going to do a part 2 because I think we can get into the business side of things. And there's probably some spiritual stuff we could probably dig into that'd be fascinating as well. As always, guys, make sure that you check out everything that Keanu's doing. There'll be links below the video to connect. There'll be a link to Rhinoceros Success. Make sure you check that book out. Appreciate you, man. Any last words? Anything else you want to say?
No, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Again, we don't know what ripples will come from this. So thank you for making the time and thank you for investing to put this out there for people to be impacted.
You know it. Thanks, sir.